you've dealt with big fights before. Coming to this, can you kind of, in a scale, like where does this rank amongst the biggest fights that you've dealt with at Showtime?
Well, look, in terms of the negotiation aspect of it, and this wasn't quite your question, I realize, it was among the more difficult. I would say it's second only to Mayweather-Pacquiao. Now, the hope is that you go through all that trouble for something that's worthwhile. And now that we're here Wednesday fight week, it definitely seems worth the trouble. Because we hoped, that this would go beyond the boxing hardcore and even the sort of boxing casual fans. And it seems like that's happening. It certainly feels like it's happening. We see the numbers, whether it's the gate or our pay-per-view pre-buys or any number of factors. So I think it has caught fire in the way that we hoped and spread a little bit more into sort of the general atmosphere as opposed to just the boxing audience. And now it sort of feels like we are getting to an event that, is as big as anything we've seen since in the Mayweather days. It certainly feels that way. I know that's saying a lot, but the numbers and the general atmosphere certainly back that up, in my opinion.
Now, this is one of those fights that it feels like you said, it kind of crosses over beyond like the hardcore boxing fans. Have you had, you keep your pulse on all things like pop culture. Who have you seen talking about this fight? So you're like, oh, wow, I'm kind of surprised that this person's talking about. I've heard like Bad Bunny might be ringside on Saturday night.
Yeah, there are those. We've heard that there's a possibility that, Patrick McCombs, might be coming. He's not somebody we've seen at fights before. But we've seen that from Tank before. I've never seen Madonna at a fight before, and somehow she ended up at Tank's fight, in the past. So, it's a great indicator. I think I said to someone, earlier today when they were asking about this, it sort of feels like since it's the NFL offseason, that we've got half of the NFL All-Pro team here, and half of the Coachella headliners. It seems like, that's where it is. And every big NBA star who's not in the playoffs is coming as well. I know LeBron wanted to come, and then playoff schedule came out, and he's got a game on the 22nd. So that's certainly not happening. But everybody short of that, certainly the biggest names in sports and music are definitely on the guest list.
When does it become a separate between a sporting event and an actual event? Because this feels like it's an event and not just a fight.
I think, and that's a great point, and that's definitely where we are. And when you start to hear things like, hey, I'm really excited about the fight this weekend, tell me who's fighting. Okay, those two things don't go together. Like, you're excited about this fight and you know nothing about, but you're excited about it because of something, and it's a buzz, it's social media clips, it's social media activity, whatever it is. When you start to get people who don't know who Ryan is, who don't know who Tank is, who don't follow boxing, that's when you've got a big event.
Last question. Do you think that now that this fight is made, that's going to make other fights that have been difficult to make a little bit easier because now the best are fighting the best before they're 30? This doesn't happen in boxing.
I hope so. I think I've never put the blame really on the fighters because I rarely think that it's fighters who are trying to avoid a fight. I think there are some elements in the business that I think now there's reason to be optimistic about. Because really, we've got a long track record of sort of crossing the street or doing collaborations when necessary. It goes back 20 years ago to Lewis Tyson or Mayweather-Pacquiao or Mayweather-McGregor. So that's never been an obstacle. I'm not going to say that we've done it in every case, but certainly we've been open to it, and our track record shows that. What I think that where the challenge has been is you've got a lot of new entrants into the sport. And when you're just launching in the sport, you typically don't go out and say, hey, I know I'm just trying to get my brand out there. Let me collaborate with a bunch of other people and water down my brand. So I think what you saw, from some of these groups, including DAZN, and it was very open. Hey, we're going to put everybody else out of business. We're not working with anybody. Screw you. Your business model sucks. And we're going to buy you all out of the business, and we're going to sign all your fighters. It was ridiculous when they said it. It's even more ridiculous now in retrospect because none of that happened. But what has happened is they've transitioned out of that attitude and realized, okay, maybe we're not going to we're not smarter than everybody else in this business. Maybe we don't know more than everybody else in this business. Maybe we're not going to take it over with this supposed big checkbook. Maybe we actually need to come in and collaborate with people to get fights done. So I think that's the most positive thing that's come out of this experience, is that maybe we're now looking at an era where some of the obstacles are no longer obstacles.
And my actual last question, non-title fights generally aren't this big. The biggest non-title fight ever is Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather is part of the 5 biggest pay-per-views. This has an opportunity to crack that. Do you think that this could be one of the top 5 non-title pay-per-view fights of all time?
I think so. And it's a good point. It's always sort of puzzled me, because you've got the same people who say there's too many titles and everybody's got a title and everything's a title fight. Stop talking about the title fights. We get a really, really exciting, good fight that's not a title fight, and they're going to say, well, it's not important because it's not a title fight. And it's literally the same people saying that. So, but in terms of the pay-per-view buys, look, I think we're struggling right now as an industry with piracy. I mean, that's not a secret, and it's not an excuse either. I think we're sort of where the music industry was, in the early 2000s. And the technology on piracy is ahead of the technology for defending its piracy, which was exactly where the music industry was. And until we figure that out, we're going to continue to struggle. So I would absolutely be predicting record-breaking events, 1 million buys, all of those things. I think there's a level of uncertainty and I think conservatism because of the piracy. Because what we've seen, the biggest that we've seen since Mayweather-McGregor, has been in the range of 800,000 for Canelo Plant. Wilder Fury was a little bit below that, and nothing else has really come close. So that's sort of the new high water mark. So if we were there, I'd be absolutely thrilled. If we exceeded that, I'd be, shocked, and I'm taking the rest of the week off. Don't call me, don't text me, don't look for me in the office. But if we're short of that, if we're in the mid 6 figures, that still is bigger than anything except the top 3 or 4 pay-per-views in the last 6 years. So I think we just have to be realistic here, where I think we've got a greater appreciation for Mayweather. It was an automatic million buys, and we really haven't seen that since. So the reality is, look, it's a lot harder to get those big numbers than people realize.